Good evening, and welcome to the St. Petersburg By Night podcasting network. Tonight, we present to you our behind-the-scenes show, After Dark.
Good evening and welcome to the St. Pete by Night Twitch channel where we play St. Petersburg by Night, a massive multiplayer 5th edition World of Darkness Chronicle set in St. Petersburg, Florida. My name is Kent, also known as Michikent, and I am the lead storyteller of St. Pete by Night, but I'm also the host of After Dark, which is what you're watching here tonight. After Dark is our behind-the-scenes show where we talk to players, we talk to storytellers, and we talk to movers and shakers in the world of darkness. And tonight we've got some really, really important movers and shakers in the show, in my humble opinion. The people that we have joining us here tonight are the hosts of the Blank Bodies podcast, who have been movers and shakers in my mind in the world of darkness for about 3 years now. And we're going to get into all about the Blank Bodies podcast, as well as the hosts and the individuals who make this program possible. So let's just jump right into it and introduce those amazing individuals right now. Take it away.
All right, I'll start. I'm Hunter. You usually hear my voice first when we start the shows, so we'll start with me. And I always have these two with me as well.
This one is John. Also, the second one that usually speaks when we intro the show. We're keeping it easy for everybody.
Yeah, we get confused if things change up too much. So.
Yeah. Hi, and I'm Sara, and on brand. I'm tired. So let's go.
Let's go. Let's do this. Well, first off, let me just say thank you so much for taking the time to join us here tonight. This was a really, really exciting get in terms of guests to have on the show, because I know a lot of our community, as well as the World of Darkness community at large, have been avid listeners of your show for quite some time and have tuned in for a variety of episodes. I've had a couple of clips sent my way, a couple of highlights sent my way, what caught my attention, because as we all know, the World of Darkness is massive and huge, and there's all kinds of content that you can absorb. But I want to say right off the bat that one of the things that I love most about the Blank Bodies podcast and you as individuals is how accessible you make the material, how accessible you make the World of Darkness, because it is a vast and rich and sometimes toxic, sometimes confusing, sometimes overwhelming setting and TTRPG as a whole, especially for people who are just getting into it over, 33 years since the first book was published. You know, there's a lot to catch up on, and lore especially is a very heavy subject when it comes to the World of Darkness. And watching your show just makes it feel very conversational, very accessible. You break things down into layman terms, but you don't do a disservice to the lore or to the content. You make it very informational, but you do it in bite-sized pieces. You do it in a very conversational way. And that's something I just want to say I really appreciate, and I know a lot of the community really appreciates for what you do. But before we get into all of that, before we talk about the Blank Potties podcast, let's talk about you as individuals. I want to start out by asking, how did you discover the World of Darkness, and around like what point in your life, when did you first come in contact with it, and did you have any preconceived notions about it in advance? Sara, let's start with you.
Oh, okay. I guess technically my first introduction to World of Darkness was the Underworld trilogy, like most people.
Which was
because that was the ripoff movie of the franchise that had to pay out for an undisclosed amount of money, and that's a whole other story.
Mm-hmm.
I so not so unknown fact about me, I moved from rural Scotland to the US when I was little, and my family's just poor as shit, as first gen Americans tend to be. So I bought a lot of things secondhand. So I just ended up buying a bunch of weird odds and ends of World of Darkness stuff from thrift shops because I grew up in a college town, so students would just yeet things.
Yeah, that's the best way to
Um,
get furniture for your apartment or house when you're, low
yeah,
income, is to just cruise through by all the frat houses and sorority houses every like semester changeover. There's free furniture, and yeah, absolutely.
yeah. So kind of like how I got into punk, just because it had the brightest albums usually. So I was just buying things because I was like, this is neat. I kind of did the same thing with Vampire the Masquerade and other like World of Darkness stuff. And then I didn't really actually play it until college,
Okay. Okay.
honestly.
Sure. And had you heard anything before that? Like, had you heard any murmurings? Because I know that World of Darkness was really popular in the mid to late '90s. Was kind of the boom period of
I
World of Darkness.
I kind of fell into World of Darkness ass backwards in the worst way possible because I knew more about the oh fudge, I'm forgetting his name. The guy who started a cult with his World of Darkness troop and then did crimes that I'm not going to talk about because of
Yes.
TOS, because I was a
Yes.
true crime girly when I was little when it was uncool. And
Well, and funny enough, that some of that went down in Florida, which is
yeah,
where I live. So it's a wonderful bit of history to have
yeah,
tied
and
into
we
all
talked.
this.
That's part of the reason why I wanted to make sure we talked about cults and like how to avoid falling into that and how to use that responsibly in your games. So,
Well, and we'll get into that in a little bit, but especially with LARPs, LARPs tend to even have more of a pull towards that cult mindset. But we could talk about that a little bit later. Hunter, how about you? How were you introduced to the World of Darkness, and did you have any preconceived notions about it beforehand?
I didn't. So I was probably midway through high school and was getting into D&D, and I was at that point I was really into like hardcore and punk and like industrial music. So I'd be going to like half price books and other like used bookshops and going through the role playing section looking for D&D stuff, and I started seeing these books that looked a lot like a lot of the album covers I was listening to. And I really didn't know much about it, but I picked up a couple because I thought they looked cool and never really did anything with it until I started hanging out with these two. And John had a bunch of the books, and I think Sara did too. And it wasn't until I actually played with them that we played a little bit, and then I started playing with some online games, but I kind of went into it pretty fresh. I didn't know too much about it other than I thought the artwork looked cool and I liked D&D, and then I played it. So I got kind of a head first introduction. I didn't really have any connection to the TTRPG community or anything like that beforehand.
So it was just really a big introduction of TTRPGs in general, let alone World of Darkness or Vampire the Masquerade. Like you just got the full experience of all of it new to you.
Yeah, I kind of started with D&D, and I got really into Ravenloft, and then I got into World of Darkness, specifically Vampire and Call of Cthulhu, and it kind of went from there.
Yeah,
But yeah,
and those games are so intertwined. I think Call of Cthulhu as well as World of Darkness. There's like a thematic element there that can transition over, and they're both unique systems, which I think is really cool about them. Since a lot of people come in through the D&D experience, it's a good way to see that there are other games and that they all have their own systems and their own way of doing things. So that's actually a really cool connection there.
Absolutely. I actually have taken a ton of Call of Cthulhu adventures and just rewritten them to run for like Hunter the Vigil. They're so close. You basically just change it from the 1960s or whenever it's set to the 90s, 2000s, and you're done.
Absolutely. And that's another wonderful thing about World of Darkness 2 being based in a real world setting, is that you could do time period games. You could have a Victorian hunter game. You could have a Wild West vampire game. Like, it's really up to your creativity and using, some research and some creativity. You can just make it happen. So that's very cool. What about you, John? How did you discover the World of Darkness, and what did you think about the game beforehand, or did you know anything about the game beforehand?
I was almost opposite the other two. I grew up in a very role-playing games household. My parents, had a couple of the advanced D&D books, and then second ed they played for forever and ever and ever. They got into World of Darkness and Shadowrun and all of that. World of Darkness was like the behind the curtains, not allowed to see this, you're too young game. Because I remember sitting under the table and playing with the little miniatures, the little paper miniatures that came with some of the kits when D&D, and then World of Darkness came around and they're like, no, you guys got to go upstairs and watch cartoons and whatnot. I'm like, but I want to, So it was that the naughty thing. When mom and dad weren't paying attention, I'd go downstairs and get in the closet and just look at the books. I wouldn't even read them. I just look at the art a lot of the time. And so I had this the secret ingredient is crime about it,
Yeah,
which
it's
is
like a deep dark secret or a guilty pleasure almost.
Exactly. Yeah. When mom and dad finally, said yeah, okay, you can read some of the books. Here's one that's pretty much just a story, and hands me the book and nod. And I'm like, let's go.
Let's do
Your
it.
parents are
Yeah.
wild.
My parents,
goddamn.
yeah. That's great. Had the old copy. It took me multiple days to actually read the Malkov page. It's the old copy with the black text on black background.
Oh,
so.
Absolutely. And it's very, very faded. I actually have a copy over there that is the same. It's really hard to make out, and I'm glad that they're republishing it now and reprinting it now so that you can read it a little bit clearer, because that copy is very, very well loved, but it has made the text even more faded. So
Exactly. Yes, definitely.
Yep. So that's interesting. So it was kind of like a legacy inherited experience where it was passed down from the fact that your players or your parents were involved with it, and it became a hobby of yours or a passion of yours. And I think that World of Darkness, especially Vampire specifically, is one of the only TTRPGs that I remember back in the day books had a age rating on it. I remember the Bali clan book and the Zemitzi clan book both required you to be 18 and up to be able to purchase the book. And I've never seen another TTRPG do that before. I've seen some with warnings. I've seen some, that have said hey, mature content, but that actually had a cover over it that you couldn't even see the artwork on the book unless you were 18 or over to buy it. And reasonably so. If you've ever seen the back of the Zemitzi clan book, you completely,
I was just thinking that.
you completely understand.
Yeah, that is a y'all search on your own. I trust you.
You look it up. We're not going to get into the description of it, but it is definitely understandable why they would do that. But yeah, it was a very mature themed game. And so I think a lot of people had to discover it later in life, especially if they got into TTRPGs at a younger age. So that brings up the next question, and this is one of my favorite questions. What do you remember about the first character you made for a World of Darkness game? What clan were they? What was the concept behind them? And I want everybody to answer this because it can be fun, but it also can be embarrassing. I know my first World of Darkness character was ridiculous. It was far too D&D for World of Darkness, but that was my intro, so I was kind of like thinking with that mindset. But Sarah, what was your first character and what do you remember about them?
First character I ever made in Vampire the Masquerade, unsurprisingly to anyone, was a Bruja. But unfortunately for everybody, I'm a big politics wonk, and I like a lot of political theory, and I've done some like poli-sci in college to fuse with art stuff I do. Oh, hello, Amos. Welcome to the void, everyone. Oh my goodness. But I decided to go really lefty, somebody who actually not only has like read theory but is actually interested in doing praxis. So I was the dickhead that was like quoting Kropotkin at people at the table.
I love that. I think that's awesome.
Yeah, and so I just say things. People were like, "No," and I'm like, "Okay, let me go get my book."
I've got it right here.
It's like I'm not. I'm riffing, yes, but I'm not making this up. God damn it!
So you would get into like real poli-sci, real political theory type stuff.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Yeah,
amazing.
so that was my first whack at the game.
Hunter, how about you?
I remember mine. So I was really into horror movies. I always have been, and so getting into vampire, it was kind of the excitement for me was getting to like play through some of those stories. So my first character was a Malkavian that I based on Herbert West from Reanimator.
Okay.
And I spent points so he could get like vicissitude, and his whole goal was to try and reverse his vampirism through his experiments.
Okay.
Probably never would have worked, but
right,
you know,
no, but
he was absolutely determined that he could like cure vampirism.
it's a very fun concept, and I actually really like the idea of like somebody not fully embracing or accepting the monster that they've been made into or become. And I love that scientific aspect. And yeah, it might be fruitless, but I think that's one of the beauties of Vampire the Masquerade and World of Darkness is one, you're all doomed. There's no getting around it. Like, it's not a happy ending for vampires. It is going to end in tragedy, even if it doesn't play out in the campaign. Like, you're either going to give into the beast or the beckoning or being destroyed one day. But I love that people still go after those what people might consider pointless plot lines because it makes sense. It's a very realistic character concept, and I really think that's a cool challenge to take on as a first character.
Yeah, I would actually like to maybe go back to that character someday now that I know a little bit more about the setting and that kind of thing. And it's definitely, I think, that goal drove him to be more of a monster just because kind of like Herbert West, where it's like the ends, do they really justify the means?
Right.
Like you're turning people into vampires and doing horrifying experiments on them to try and fix them.
Yeah.
And it probably won't. So you're just making the situation worse in the long run, but
I actually ran a werewolf campaign recently, and one of the werewolves was a scientist who was trying to determine if vampirism was caused by banes and if there was a cure to vampirism from the umbral side of things. Like if you had to dig out the bane that's in them, and if you could exorcise the bane, could they be cured of the vampirism? And it was a very actually interesting concept, very similar along those lines. They weren't about destroying vampires; they were about curing vampires. So it was a really really cool concept. But I really appreciate that. John, what about you? How did you get started?
Again, very different. I think that I had a very I've been playing D&D like second ed, smash it, dungeon crawl, So I came in and I was told, oh, these Bruja, they're rebels and they are like, fuck the man. So I was very much just a like, fuck you, dad, I'm going skateboarding and I can punch through brick walls kind of guy.
Yeah.
There wasn't a ton of depth to him as much as I'm gonna kick over the traffic cone and scream anarchy.
Just very very simplistic, like the kids
Yeah.
from Talladega Nights. Like I don't even know what that means, but I love it. Let's go.
Yep.
That's very cool because one of the things I love about this interview already is that we are getting a wide variety of perspectives. Everybody has their own entry point and their own, experiences, and they're so varied and vast. So I would ask next, what is it about Vampire the Masquerade that really either spoke to you or called to you as a system to the point that you would go forward with making a podcast and dedicating so much time and effort and probably money and sanity and all these things to putting this all together? What was it about the game specifically that spoke to you and that made you want to do this, Sarah?
Oh. For me, I tend to view tabletop RPGs as like a folk art. And it's, I think, a way for people to not only engage in play, but engage in building stories and understanding their expectations for themselves and expectations for each other by the kind of stories and characters that they tell and share and express and whatnot. And I tend to find Vampire is a good role play system to really dig into the little minutiaes of uh what makes a man kind of a thing. It's very Castlevania. That kind of thing. And I like that the scale can be either very street level or very uh overarching, kind of just you know what are the goals of humanity, like what makes you a good person or a bad person, and what whilst you're in the process of dying, like what matters to you and what are you willing to do for those things. So and also vampires, just because it is an AU of actual world history, I really enjoy history.
That makes
So
sense.
being able to grab like actual history facts and drag that into the game and use that as ways to explore other cultures and bits is also just like a big thing for me.
Hunter.
So for me, I think the big part is just my friendship with these two, and we've played Vampire probably the most of anything. We played D&D, we played Shadowrun, we've played all that, but like I ran Hunter the Vigil for us. I think it was our longest game we've ever had. I think it ran like 5 years on and off, 5 or 6 years. Um, and during COVID, the one thing we kept going was Sara had been running Vampire for us a little bit. And then I worked in a warehouse at the time. And so I would listen to podcasts all day. And there was a lot of podcasts that were like great introductions for D&D and a lot of different games. But I kind of saw a gap in like the introductory, like helping new players play the game for World of Darkness and Vampire specifically. Like there's some great Vampire and World of Darkness podcasts, don't get me wrong. Like I won't name names, but there's a bunch that I love and listen to. But like a lot of them, either there's an assumed knowledge or they're talking at a level that's not, I don't think, aimed, not even that like they're not succeeding, but they're not aiming at getting people to that like entry level position. So when COVID lockdown started ending and we kind of started hanging out again in person, I kind of proposed the idea for the podcast. Is like, we've been playing this forever, this is like kind of a core bit of our friendship, and I think we could kind of, that'd be a fun thing for us to do again as we start able to actually hang out again. And so that for me was how I got the idea for the show.
Well, and Vampire and World of Darkness have always kind of been a niche subsect of TTRPGs. I mean, D&D is a dime a dozen. Like you can get so much D&D content so easily. And now Pathfinder as well, after, Pathfinder took all the 3.5 addicts of D&D and continued on that train. And there's these bigger, larger games that are the juggernauts of the TTRPG community. But even in Vampire's heyday, when it was very popular, it was still popular around a niche audience. And so I think that more content for Vampire, more content for World of Darkness is a wonderful thing, because if you didn't know somebody who knew, or have some sort of connection to get into it, it almost could come across, even over these 30 years, as a very like gatekeepy, very quiet back alley game, which is fitting considering the setting. And so it was very hard to access, or gain access to, and to get a good explanation or teaching of, because a lot of the people didn't necessarily want to take the time to teach new people or time to introduce new people. They were either like, either you're in or you're out, we're not gonna, worry about this too much. And so that's something I really appreciate about the podcast is it is bringing in a whole new generation. With the fifth edition of Vampire the Masquerade and the World of Darkness coming out, it's a great opportunity to do that, to introduce a new audience, because those of us who love it want to see it continue, and therefore we need new people to join in. The old guard is retiring, dying out, losing interest, whatever the case may be, and we need to have a new fan base if we want this to continue. And I think you guys do a marvelous job of that. John, how about you?
Kind of what drew me to World of Darkness and kind of kept me in, honestly, was that art. There even now there are times that I'll pull out books that I don't even have too much interest in, anything having to do with the Tremere, and I'll still look at the art. I'll, I'll still look at the art and be like, that's awesome art. Like, I appreciate it. I appreciate the work that went into it and the artists. We were fortunate enough to meet some at Ice and Dice a couple years ago, and it was like hard not to fanboy.
Absolutely. The artwork is incredible. It's some of the
So
most
good.
incredible artwork in TTRPGs across the board. I totally, absolutely get it. Like, even down to the character sheets and the layouts and designs of the character sheets, like everything. Art is clearly an important point for World of Darkness, especially in the older editions, like second edition revised. Artwork was so, so important and was a big part of the storytelling. So I totally get that. I absolutely get that.
It does a great job at like setting the vibe, and then that's kind of what's kept me since is that underworld again. Like, everything's gritty, it should be in like a green or blue filter, and all of the alleys are wet. It's a good vibe, and it's fun to tell stories in that. It's a safe place to look at really scary things, kind of like horror movies.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what I stick with. And then Hunter was like, "Hey, do you want to do this podcast?" And I was like, "Hell yeah, that sounds cool."
Absolutely. Let's talk about this thing
how I got
enjoy.
in on it.
No, that's fantastic. And I think that because art plays such a big, part in World of Darkness, it influences the storytelling of World of Darkness. Because something I love about it is how storytellers can be so immersive and so descriptive, but they're also describing things that we in our lives have either encountered ourselves or have seen portrayed in media, like streetlights shining off wet pavement and like, alleyways with brick buildings covered in graffiti. Like, these are all things that we have tangibly encountered, and therefore it makes it a very grounded and real game that we can all, put ourselves in and empathize with to a certain degree, that more fantastical games make it a little more difficult. You can only describe a goblin so many times before you revert back to just saying, yeah, okay, you come across a pack of goblins. And we all have our own imagination of what that looks like, whether it's tailored from Lord of the Rings or it's tailored from the art in the books. It's still something that we can't necessarily tangibly comprehend. Whereas almost every aspect, aside from some exceptions like maybe the dreaming and the Umbra, we can tangibly comprehend. We all know what these cities look like, and if we don't, we can look them up. We can see the streets of Chicago if there's a game set in Chicago. We have more than ever the technology to go onto Google Maps or Google Earth and get a street view shot of the corner that this fight is taking place on, or this business is located. And I think that makes it just that much more engaging and immersive. So what I wanted to ask next was about the origin of the podcast, and it sounds like it did come from a combination of the pandemic and it coming to an end, as well as Hunter kind of introducing the concept. So, Hunter, I'll let you take it from there. What encouraged you to bring these two wonderful individuals on board? And it sounds like the inspiration was to teach people about World of Darkness, but please expand upon that.
Yeah, so like I said, I was working in a warehouse at the time, and it was a lot of downtime or just a lot of time that I could sit and listen to podcasts. And there's some really great ones for other game systems for getting into them, like Call of Cthulhu and obviously D&D and Shadowrun. And I found a bunch of great like introductory podcasts. And I did listen to a lot of the other vampire shows, and I do enjoy them, but like a lot of them were not really that interested in talking about V5, which we were trying to play. So that was a big sticking point for me. It's like, well, I'm trying to find something I can listen to that will get me to where I need to be as someone who has played previous editions. Like I want to hear about what's going on with V5, where are things at, and there wasn't any of that I could find, and I could be wrong, but I just wasn't hearing a lot of that, and there wasn't a lot that was really getting into like the mechanics and the introduction. So that was a big thing. And then, I come from a music background. I've played in bands. I was semi-professional musician for a while. Not crazy successful. I just had really cheap rent, but I did live off like hardcore music for a while, and so like producing music and content and performing have always been big for me. And we all lived in a show house together too, like where we would book bands in our basement and put people up for the night. So we've always been entertainment adjacent to some degree. And so again, it was just my friendship with two of them, and World of Darkness is something that we played multiple times. We played Vampire. I ran that Hunter game forever, and so to me, they were just the two obvious people to reach out to for it. Um, so
And Sarah, what were your thoughts when Hunter brought this concept, this project to you, and what was kind of the selling point to decide to do it? Because podcasting is no joke. It's not an easy thing. There's recordings, there's re-recordings, there's editing. There's all of this that goes into it. What was it that really made you want to get involved with a project like this?
Well, yeah, like Hunter said, we've been involved in like the DIY and like the punk hardcore metal scene here in Indianapolis for a hot minute. So just finding something we want to do and just being like, okay, I guess we're just doing this now. And I made a bunch of pop filters out of like wire hangers and pantyhose. That's what we
Yeah.
had for several episodes. It was a problem.
The
But
amount of tape
the amount of
on
duct
our
tape.
mic stands, just balls of it, trying to keep these things
Because
from
gravity.
just
a lot
A
of ones
nightmare.
were ones we saved from the old house venue that were like, well, we can tape that leg back on, and then we don't we save $30. So there we go.
Yep.
That's
Yeah,
fair.
so yeah, being able to bring that kind of like actual like DIY energy into the overall like the TTRPG scene, because I think we've basically gone from being the punks that like TTRPGs to now being the punks at TTRPG spaces. Is kind of where
Yeah.
we're at now, which is interesting. But yeah, and I'm a huge fucking nerd. Anybody can tell with the show, because I throw my pussy way too hard into doing research. Uh, and yeah, I like being able to do media analysis and being able to use themings in games to discuss and dissect real world issues. And when we started the show, I don't think we'd either seen a podcast that was very pro fifth edition. And I'll be honest, straight out of the gate, fifth has been my favorite system to
100%.
ST for, because I was like, guys, I can be hammered as fuck and still do this. Like, this is fantastic. Everybody
It's a
knows what's
lot more
going on.
streamlined, that's for sure.
It is so much. It's very wham bam, thank you, ma'am. Like, I'm here to tell a story with my friends. I don't need crunchy dice. Also, I'm going to apologize, everybody. Amos, my little void baby, is afeared because my neighbors are setting off fireworks.
Oh
So
no.
beware the La Sombra baby. Uh, so yeah, there wasn't a lot of pro V5 stuff. There wasn't a lot of people dissecting the lore of World of Darkness in ways that were more than just what the book was presenting. They're just kind of reciting and sharing what's in the books, which is good for people that don't know the books. But you can go so much deeper with that.
Mm-hmm.
And I like to kick that door open. And I appreciate my friends here for also just allowing me to be just this weird little femme queer, whatever the fuck I am, space advocate in the person area, which is nice.
Well, and I think that works really well with the game. Like with a lot of what people would call counterculture or alternative cultures, those are all incorporated into and embraced, and I mean it with the pun, into World of Darkness, like the Bruja being big protesters and followers of the punk movement, at least in their generic form. And they bring in a lot of these elements into the game itself. So I feel like it's like, hey, ever feel like an outcast? This is the game for you. Ever feel like D&D is not your style? This is the game for you. Like, they really did open up the boundaries to pretty much everything. And yes, they do have some problematic history, which you guys touch on really well in the podcast. But for the time period, so did everyone. Even D&D is still dealing with problematic history even to this day. And so I think that's just how games evolve and mature, and culture evolves and matures. But yeah, especially World of Darkness is like, hey, bring us your goths, bring us your punks, bring us, your protesters, and this is a game that they can all find something in. So that totally makes sense. And I'm glad that the podcast also embraces that philosophy as well. John, how about you?
Well, I think Sarah touched on a lot of what I was thinking here.
Oh, damn.
But honestly, the motivating factor for a podcast for me was Hunter's like, "You want to do this with me and Sarah?" And I'm like, "Oh darn, an excuse to hang out with my friends and talk about a cool game that we all like." Like, Sherzies, I probably um had like the largest gaps. I feel like I know a lot about specific things in World of Darkness. So it was kind of cool to be able to be like, okay, I will leave those topics alone, and so that I can come into it with being like, I don't know what the fuck we're talking about. We're gonna learn today. Um and when I said that to Hunter, he was like, yeah, that works. We need somebody who doesn't know what the fuck we're talking about. I was like, neat.
Could could any of you have
That
a
man
match?
keeps me so
Okay.
fucking grounded because otherwise I will just go off into esoterica for
It's easy
hours.
to do. It's so easy to do because they are talking about real world stuff, but adding, a horror spin to stuff or a conspiratorial spin to stuff. And it does send your brain down some really interesting rabbit holes, especially when you get into the research and they're talking about history, but they're also talking about hidden societies and all kinds of stuff. So it is really easy to just kind of keep going beyond what the material says because it inspires you and gets your brain really working in overdrive. Could any of you have ever imagined that it would gain the following and the success that it has? I mean, you're at what, almost 90 episodes now and counting. You've got, and we'll talk about this soon, the live show you're doing at Gen Con this year. Like, you are expanding and growing more and more and more as time continues. Could you have ever thought that this is where this was going to end up and continue on to? Hunter, we'll start with you since you were kind of the brainchild behind this. Did you have any visions of this? Was this the goal you were reaching for, or is it just kind of one of the fruits of your labor?
I think a little bit of both. I definitely didn't expect for us to grow as fast as we have, and did not expect the amount of like awesome opportunities that we've gotten already. But when you're creating any sort of art and releasing it publicly, I think there is always just some desire for success and for people to actually like engage with whatever it is you're creating, whether it's music or a podcast or a piece of visual art. So that was something we kept in mind from the beginning, is like, we do want to, if we're going to put something out for people to listen to, we want it to be as professional as we can get it, even for the three of us. Even though we're coming from like a DIY angle, like, we do want to be as professional as we can. We want to like make sure it sounds good, release it right, stay on a schedule, really like do the basics properly, and then just see where it takes us. Like, this is going to be our second year at Gen Con. We did a live show last year as well, and that was an awesome opportunity. So I'm very excited again for this year, and we've made some great friends every year we've gone. We went 2 years ago just without any plans, just showed up and started networking and meeting people, and now we're working on multiple events with other people, and we've got our live show. We've got some other projects in the works. I don't that we'll have to reveal soon. We've got some big coming up this month for the show, a big first for us. So I think I think it really is. I think it's a bit of luck. I think it's a lot of hard work, and I'm really happy with where we're at. I didn't expect it, but I'm really stoked on where we are.
Sarah, how about you? Could you have
Yeah.
even predicted that you were going to be doing live shows in front of an audience and all of this when this project first started? Was that a goal of yours? Like how do you feel about how far you've come and where you're headed?
Uh, Fuck no, I did not expect any of this. Gonna be completely honest. It's one of those. Uh, because like the scene that we've come from is like so small with like the music, because Indianapolis has a really good music scene, but like we get no fucking traction ever, and it drives me fucking bonkers.
I
Drives me
will
bonkers.
say our hardcore scene is pretty big right now. We're actually finally getting some good recognition.
Oh, thank the
So
fuck
shout
God.
out indie
Oh,
hardcore.
hell
But
yeah.
Oh
Yeah,
boy.
and there's like yeah, and there's other like a wide variety of like different music acts. Like I used to work at a women's clothing store where I was working on costumes and outfits for local like female rap artists and things like that, which was super fun. Um but we kind of have this aesthetic niche on top of the fact that the lads have been kind enough to let me throw in my academic bullshit on top of that, which I know some people love that kind of thing, and I know some people are just like, I don't give a fuck. Please do not. Why are you bringing real things and real subjects into my fantasy space? Shakes fist. Old man shakes fist at cloud kind of thing. So I've been really, really touched and pleased with the responses we've gotten back. Like our little community Discord has got a good little mix of people from all sorts of different backgrounds, different cultures, different perspectives on things. And everybody is very chill and been very supportive, and they bring their own thoughts and things and have actually really in-depth discussions on alternative versions of the lore history and how real world events affect things in the game and vice versa. And it's been fantastic. I'm just every time like, oh shit, we're doing it, fuck.
Yeah. And it is amazing just how much you've made it a communal thing as well. Like this is something I really compliment this show on too, is that you do know your viewers, you know your community, you give great shout outs to members in the Discord when they offer up questions, you take topic suggestions, like you really do engage with your audience, and you even go so far as to engage with the community at large on social media. Like I've seen Blank Bodies comment on people's TikToks and people's videos. I remember posting a video being like, people, trying to absorb the World of Darkness lore, and they're like, this is madness. And you're like, hey, we're going to actually be talking about the lore on this coming episode and stuff like that. And I love that. Like, it's really, really good promotion for the show, but it also is just like, hey, come join us, come listen, and not in a business fashion, just like, oh, we love that you're talking about Samuel Haight. We're going to be talking about Samuel Haight, so why don't you come watch this episode where we do, or whatever the case is. It just does. It makes it feel extremely accessible. And again, like friends, like community members are friends sitting around having this conversation with you as they're listening to the episodes or as they're engaging on the Discord. And it does feel like we're all peers and not, okay, we're listening to celebrities discuss something they love in an inaccessible manner. Like, no, it's just like we're all fans of this thing. We're all the same. We're all very real and very grounded. And let's share this conversation with them, but also let them have input on the conversation, which I think is just so cool. So, John, how about you? What did you think going into this project? Did you think you'd make it this far? And how do you feel about this ride that you've been on for what, almost 3 years now and 90 plus episodes, and with the future on the horizon?
Well, I'll say, like Hunter said, I think that everyone that starts in any sort of like artistic endeavor hopes that there is engagement, hopes that people like it, hopes that people, give feedback and reach out about it. I will also say that the first person from Canada that joined our Discord who was like, yeah, I'm in Canada, I was like, we're multinational! We're in multiple countries! Oh my god! I freaked out because it's not what I expected at all, I expected that to take years and years if it happened ever. But I think that all three of us were also totally happy with just the idea of being like, okay, we'll get like 50 people to join this Discord and then we'll just make a few friends. Because, like you said, it's all friends. The Vampire is a game about telling spooky stories with your pals. And what's the point if we're not going to be making friends doing it? That's kind of where I hope that things go. I just continue to hope that we can build community and make some pals. Our Discord is one of the biggest things I'm proud of. I've talked to people about Vampire the Masquerade, and they've been like, "Oh, VTM, huh?"
Yeah.
It has a bit of we've got a bit of a backstory there. Yeah, yee. But I'll just be like, bet, join our Discord. Here's the link, bet. And I've had people join, and then they've reached out to me afterward and been like, "Holy shit, what?" And it's these people don't expect it, so come hang out is what I'm saying.
Vampire is a very polarizing topic. It does have a very checkered history. A lot of good in my mind, but they've had missteps, and the community as a large has had its own share of missteps. We've had our fair share of toxic people come through. We've had our fair share of people, in the LARPing community take things a little too far, take advantage of other people. But the fact that we have positive role models in my mind like yourselves still in the community who are just saying like, hey, this place is still safe, it's still okay, and more so than ever, especially in these modern nights, I feel like it's become even more so that we do have people who are like, hey, we recognize the bad of this, but let's tell you about the good. Let's, we're not going to hide from the bad, we're not going to pretend like it didn't happen. Like you guys addressed some of your episodes. I remember when you were talking about the Ravnos early on, you were like, they had some fucked up stuff in the old Ravnos books, and they've done a really good job of taking a lot of that out and trying to, still make it a part of the game and a part of the setting. Like you address it outright. You don't deny what it was, but you also say like, it's okay. They're learning. They're making it better. Like the mistakes are being fixed. You don't have to completely throw this game in the dumpster because of the mistakes of the past that they've made. Like they are adapting, and I love that you acknowledge it. Now, one of the things that I found particularly interesting is when this podcast started and you started airing, there was very little fifth edition material out. I don't think a lot of the books had published yet. I think you had the core book, maybe the Camarilla book, possibly the Anarchs. I think the Sabbat book was on the horizon at the time, and that these things hadn't been published yet. So that's a very small amount of material to draw from, especially with B5 and 5th edition being the focus. Did you at the time, because I know they were going through publisher issues, they were going through production issues, they had writers coming and going. It was kind of an unsteady and undetermined future as to whether this game was going to really take off or not. Did you have any apprehension at the time that like, we're starting a product that might not even exist in 6 months, or that there's only ever going to be 3 books published about? Was that ever a concern of yours, or were you confident that like the material itself is enough, and the fact that we have all of this predated material from older editions, we can carry this through? Or was it like, hopefully we have more to talk about in 12 episodes, and that they release another book, and that we're not stuck just talking about the core book again and again and again for 90 episodes? Hunter, I'll start with you again as the brainchild.
I think we're really lucky how much the game has taken off and how much content we have been getting the last couple of years, and it's really picked up a lot since we started doing the show. But I don't think we're ever worried. We actually have had a lot of ideas when we sat down. We had a couple get together sessions where we didn't record, we didn't have anything written. We just sat and talked and like kind of staked out like what our goals were, what kind of episodes we wanted to do, that sort of thing. And I have like an old notebook with a ton of ideas that we were going to cover, and I don't think we've done it like a third of them, just because there has been so much new content, and there has been so much just from those core early books that we've been able to like talk about and go into, that we haven't had to bother. Like, we had talked about doing more like vampire media and talking about more of the influences on vampire. We just haven't gotten to it yet because there's so much coming out, and there's so much, I think, foundational work that we're still getting through. Like, we're still kind of working our way through the core rules at this point. So I don't think there's ever a worry. And then, of course, there's all the old content too that is still canon, and we haven't even touched on any Chronicles of Darkness stuff yet, or most of the non-vampire stuff. So I mean, I don't think there's ever a worry for us that we would run out of things to talk about. I think at worst we said, well, maybe we can start covering other new games and alongside and just kind of go more into the horror side of things. But that's something we still want to do. But again, there's just been so much, there's been no need to.
Yeah, you've got plenty of topics to cover, and obviously a community that's very interested in hearing more, that is suggesting episode, concepts and asking questions and keeping fueling that fire to the point that you're not having any shortage of things to talk about. I think that also has a lot to do with the chemistry and the history that all three of you share, because there are always stories to be told. There's all this to draw upon from your individual and group experiences, and the fact that you do bring very similar but differing perspectives to things like hatred of Tremere, or love of Changeling, which I think is a very interesting thing to hear about. You guys do dabble on some of the other splats. Hunter, another example. You do bring those into the conversation, so it's not solely a vampire podcast, even though that's a lot of what you talk about. You will talk about the other games that are similar or other systems that you enjoy, and I think that's great too. Also, I think the reason World of Darkness can continue like it does is because of creators like yourselves and others in the community that keep the interest up. They sell books, they get people to attend events, they do keep the interest going. And I think that World of Darkness recognizes and embraces that, as well, as they are getting really into highlighting members of the community who do cosplay or do shows, and that they are trying to say, like, we have a community out there, and they're thankful for the fact that shows like this exist and can make the community larger and continue growing the overall topic. My next question would be, what is your favorite splat that they've released so far in the 5th edition, or favorite book? Even, like, we've got the book about romance, we've got the book about Chicago by Night, obviously a staple of the vampire system. What's your favorite 5th edition book that they've released so far? Sarah, let's start with you.
Oh, okay, so far. I think for me right now, my favorite book is, unfortunately, it only exists as a PDF, and that pisses me the fuck off. I'm just like, guys, I would love to have a physical copy of this, please. I'm begging you, let me throw money at you. Is the Book of Not Apocrypha book that just came out not too long
Yes.
ago?
Mm-hmm.
Because it does a good job of condensing a lot of things that were going to be building up for the Gehenna War book that's coming up, and a lot of things are happening in V5 in relation to ancient lore. And there's actually written out fragments in that book that exist in like weird little splats, or have just been offhandedly mentioned in the lore. And I'm like, oh, it's here now. I don't have to caffeine addled at 4 a.m. control F all of my PDFs to find this now. Fantastic.
Yeah. Well, and I was one of the first people to pre-order the big Book of Nod box set, so I have it
Yeah.
sitting over on the floor there, because I was so excited that they were still making the Book of Nod a thing, that they were going to expand upon it, that they were going to release all of this stuff that I couldn't afford when I was a kid, but now as an adult, thankfully, can afford. And I absolutely indulged, and I agree. The Book of Nod Apocrypha is a really, really nice addition they added. John. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, I'm really tempted to, and I don't know if people would be interested in this, in printing it out like on nicer paper and just like bookbinding my own copy of it at this point, because I'm like, I just want it on the shelf next to my Book of Nod and my Revelations of the Dark Mother and all that.
Absolutely. John, how about you? What's your favorite supplement that they've released in the 5th edition universe so far?
Well, I think that my initial response is actually not my serious response, but the companion, because that's where they gave me Zamitzi.
Yeah.
Um, so that was my favorite for quite a while. Recently, though, I think that I might actually argue Blood Sigils.
Okay.
Because I haven't like explored a lot of the World of Darkness magic system, specifically like blood sorcery and stuff. And it's been a really cool book to read through and learn bits and bobbles of different types of blood sorcery and how they're saying like, look, we don't have the paper to write all of this blood sorcery for you. Here's how you do it. And I
Well,
think that's super duper cool because one of the biggest things that I was sad about with some of the disciplines was like, there's an old, I feel like I remember there being an old obtenebration discipline where you could have like Oblivion be your fucking sword.
mm-hmm.
That's cool for a Lasombra, but it doesn't exist in the book. And now with this, you could totally make a ritual or something like that.
Well, and they've introduced a design your own mechanic, a design your own thin blood alchemy, or a design your own blood sorcery. And I think that is super cool. It gives a lot more power into the hands. I mean, we've always had it in
Mhm.
TTRPGs. I think it's one of the unspoken rules of you do what you want. Like, yes, here's some guidelines, here's a system, but almost every rule book now has something that says, hey, you want to throw these rules in the trash? Go for it. You don't want to use a certain rule? Go for it. Even though we've always been able to do that. I do like that they are giving some structured possibilities. Like, if you want to design a blood sorcery ritual, if you want to design a thin blood alchemy, here are some suggestions we give and some guidelines that we offer to you to use. But they have allowed more creativity, or at least encouraged a lot more creativity in fifth edition. And the Blood Sigils book is a perfect example of that. Also, they brought back cultinism, which I am a huge fan of. I'm glad that they're bringing back that they're knocking the brakes off of fifth edition and being like, hey, you want Salubri? Here's Salubri. You don't have to use the Dark Ages rulebook. You want to use Caldinism? Here's Caldinism. And of course, me being a big advocate of lore, I'm like, well, yeah, but okay, you have to be like, it has to make sense, and you have to come from a certain bloodline, or like, how did you even learn about it? But I think that the fact that they're saying it's possible, and here's rules for it, and here's some examples of it, is a really cool thing that they introduced in Blood Sigils. I wish they brought paths back or done a little bit more with paths. I hate Tremere as much as you do, but at least paths decided some structure and gave like a line, a literal path to follow,
Yeah.
whereas now it's kind of like scattershot of like a little bit of everything, but not refined movement of the mind or anything like that like they had before. But I do appreciate what they did with that book for sure.
I
Hunter.
think
Oh
that
yeah, go ahead, John. Sorry.
I think that the make your own stuff is really awesome, especially because I think that both.
Oh,
Oh,
Oh, lost him.
we
oh
lost.
All
no.
right, we'll have him back here in just a second.
While we're waiting on him, one thing I think is really interesting about that book, and especially the design your own aspect, is I know there's been a lot of rumors about what's coming next. I know Mage comes up a lot, and I'm curious if any of that design philosophy of here's how you design your own magic is going to pull through to a possible M5 when they're already kind of giving us rules for how to take this system and make your own things with it. How that might translate to a system like Mage that is, I would say, 50% based on making your own magic. I
Right.
could see that being like a setup, a test bed, kind of like, well, if we do this for vampire, maybe we can translate this to, sphere magic,
Well, and
and however that comes out.
that's another cool thing about fifth edition. I've talked a lot about it on this show, but I'd love to hear your perspectives on it. The way they've rolled out fifth edition in general, I don't know if this is intentional or not, but it seems really genius to me because I feel like every system that they've released, in the order that they've released it, has been a test play for the next system coming. So they started with Vampire, the pillar, the forefront, the most popular game they've released so far. But rather than going immediately to like Werewolf or Mage, which are the other two primary, systems or splats, they rolled out Hunter in the middle,
Mhm.
which was a very interesting choice. But looking at Hunter and where we've come since then, it's clear that a lot that they introduced in Hunter, they were test playing for Werewolf. And then when they released Werewolf, me being the primary werewolf storyteller on our server, I'm seeing a lot of elements of Mage. I'm seeing a lot of possibilities for how they could introduce Mage in the werewolf system. And so it is kind of laying out a road in front of you of taking, small dips into some of the less known splats or the less, populated splats. But it does make sense. And I'd love to hear what you think about that. And if you kind of agree with that philosophy. Sarah.
I'm into that because it is literally a world of darkness. All of these entities exist simultaneously, whether on the same lattice of reality or not. Uh, oh my god, John has been undiablerized.
Yes.
I'm back.
Okay, are you good? Are you good, my dude?
Yeah, as usual, technology doesn't like me. I think
It's
Elisambra
okay.
lives in my walls.
That's
That's really what it is.
That's
Yeah.
okay. We understand that. But yeah, getting back onto the multi-splat thing. I'm definitely in the camp of like I've been the crazy dumb fuck storyteller that's like, yeah, you want to run a multi-splat game at my table? That's fine. Fuck the balance. And then dealt with the problems later. And I don't recommend that if you don't have players that aren't going to be cool with just like YOLOing or adjusting as you need to go. Because there's some players that like a lot of structure. There's some that are just kind of like, we're having a good time. Fuck it. Uh, but with Fifth Ed, that's one of the things I'm really excited about. And with the show, we are kind of delving more into the other splats a bit and touching on how they work separately and how they can actually be combined with each other. Because there's a lot of things in the Hunter system that you can pull into Vampire, especially if you get vampire games that are very action heavy or combative or things with the Second Inquisition. And then with the Blood Sigils book, if and when Mage 5 drops, you have stuff that's already pre established lore wise, where these nerds can now talk to each other and just be like, I too have seen the Time Knife.
Yeah, well, and I think more than ever, fifth edition is more balanced among the splats than any other edition they've had so far, than any other game. Like, if you wanted to run a multi-splat table, I feel like the rules accommodate that. They are not actively fighting you like they were in previous editions. You tried to have a werewolf and a vampire in the same party in a previous edition, it just wasn't going to work. It was going to be a lot of work and very difficult. Same with Mage, but now I feel like, yes, things have been nerfed a little bit. Things have been, the powers have been reduced on what they can do. We don't have 10 dots in disciplines like we did in, old Vampire. But it does create a balance. You can run hunters and vampires and werewolves all in the same universe or even in the same group if you wanted to. And it wouldn't be a complete mental breakdown for the storyteller who's trying to remember the mechanics of all of those systems, but it does blend a lot nicer and easier than ever before, I think. And I think it is very much possible, and that shows again some of the genius behind the way they're rolling out the systems and the work they're taking in creating the systems and adapting the systems to be able to do that. Hunter.
One thing, so on the show, I tend to write the non-vampire episodes. So I took over when we did Hunter month. I did Werewolf. I'm sure we'll be touching on those again and any new splats that come out. And one thing I noted in our Werewolf episodes recently, when I did like the mechanics episode, is even if you go back to the original Vampire core book and you look at that Werewolf template, it's not that dissimilar from what we got in the rules for Werewolf now.
Yeah.
So I think that's super interesting because to me it implies that they had more foresight than a lot of people want to give them credit for. And yes, they had to delay Werewolf and rework some stuff, but I think at a core level, at least mechanically, they've been thinking a lot of this out a lot more than some people will give them credit for. And I did think Hunter was an interesting second rollout. It's always been my favorite, not just because it's named after me, but it's just what we've played and always loved. And so I thought it was interesting mostly because for running Hunter, you have the templates, but at the time you only really had vampire books to use as antagonists. But as we're getting more now that we have werewolf, I know that we pretty certain there's going to be more splats coming out. Hunter is going to expand as a game more and more. Like my favorite World of Darkness game is probably Hunter the Vigil, if only because for that system it turns every other Chronicles of Darkness book basically into like a monster manual. So hundreds of Chronicles books, and all of a sudden those are just like extra antagonists for your Vigil players. And I think we're going to start seeing that more with the newest edition of Hunter too. And I wouldn't be surprised someone in the chat said the Imbued. They've hinted at them. I would love to see them. I'm sure they'd get their own book because it's kind of hinted at in there. I would love to see an Imbued book. I'm very excited. My personal guess is we're going to get Mage and then Changeling and then Wraith. That's how I think they're stacking things up from what they've hinted at. Because there's, like you mentioned, there's a lot of crossover in Werewolf and like the Magic Realms and that. And then they've just been hinting at Changeling for so long, and the Fey creatures they've popped up. They're probably like the second most detailed for antagonists in every splat. They get a big write up in Werewolf. They have a very large write up in Hunter. They're hinted at in the original more than mages are in the original like vampire core book. And so I can't see them going too much longer without some kind of changeling.
No, absolutely. And I think that with the release of Hunter when it was, they've really stressed the power of humans in this edition. Like before, humans were often just the setting, the backdrop, the fodder of most games. And they had to make hunters like insanely supernatural in the original Hunter the Reckoning. Like it was absurd the things they could do in the original Hunter the Reckoning. But now with this more grounded approach, even in the first vampire book, they're like, hey, humans are the real antagonists. Like they're your biggest danger, your biggest threat. And it's a threat to werewolves, it's a threat to vampires, it's a threat to everyone. It's even a threat to hunters to a certain degree. They stress orgs, they stress, all of this stuff. And I really do like that Hunter was the second drop. I really actually ended up liking that rather than putting it off, and not really addressing it. They dropped it second. We're like, Hunters are a player in this game more than ever. I mean, I never played Hunter the Vigil, so it could have also been really good there, but they must have taken something from that and incorporated it into the re-release of Hunter the Reckoning, because hunters are heavy-hitting players in the game, and I really appreciate that about this approach, especially with the popularity of Supernatural and stuff like that. It makes sense that that's something that's a target demographic they were going for. John, let's go to you. The release of systems, the way this 5th edition has been presented, what do you think about this path and the way they've made the systems a little bit more, intertwined and a little bit more crossover between them? How do you feel about all that? And do you have any thoughts on that?
I love the idea that we can essentially just get like, a monster team and go do monster team stuff. I think it's super cool. It's interesting how they have the balance from different, splat to splat. Like werewolf is still like, okay, put a werewolf in a room with an entire coterie of fledglings or even neonates. They're probably gonna die.
Yeah.
And the werewolf is gonna walk out, and in a few days he's gonna feel all right, probably. But at the same time, that same coterie or one member of that coterie could do, social manipulation or even mental manipulation to make that werewolf ruin his own life.
Yep.
It's balanced in very different ways, and I think it's balanced in ways that the supernaturals that you're playing really feel that way already anyway, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. So I've got some questions from the community I'd like to get into, because I could talk about systems and lore forever, but I want to make sure to address these before we run out of time. Bardic, one of our community members, asks, "What is a topic you've been wanting to cover but haven't had the chance to yet?" And I'll let you all answer individually. Sarah, we'll start with you.
Oh fuck. Trying to think of a good one because there's a lot of topics that I'm like, let's do the thing. There's Do you want me to go light or you want me to go heavy with this?
Both. Give me both.
Okay, cool. Light one for me would be just getting more into, because we just did an episode on just kind of, I'm gonna say mid-tier ridiculous weapons and things you can do for combat. Because don't get me wrong, I enjoy a good vampire, bitchy, catty, Elysium, snipey, whatever. Uh, but sometimes I really just like to delve into my 90s action hero. Like, what if we just set everything on fire? And having templates in the book for that is helpful to kind of understand actually what you're getting into. So, uh, getting into more of that to give people options, because there are a lot of people that come from the D&D or more action side of things, and everyone being horny and gay at the table is fun for some folks, but some people just want to do action, and
Yeah.
I totally respect that style of gameplay. um on the heavier kind of end of things, there's a lot of things from old world that have bridged and carried over into fifth ed that we have been trying to talk about, and there are some heavier topics that I would like to get into because I think it's important to talk about, because if you're going to be playing a game that covers things uh like how the Camarilla has this policy on culling or branding thin bloods, I'm like, that is bananas of a thing to be doing as a culture, and like, what does that mean, and like actually getting to what that says at the table. I've actually bought and have been slowly reading through a bunch of different philosophy books, like specifically getting into like necropolitics.
Mm-hmm.
So that's down to the pipeline later. So when the patrons vote to cover thin bloods, that'll
Yeah,
happen. But
absolutely.
until then, nope.
St. Petersburg by Night is brought to you through collaborations with our partnered vendors: Wolfpack Dice, Ember Fox Dice, Dragon Ink Dice, Farrah the Bard, Champs Tramps, Panty Artista, Chromatic Creations. Links to our partnered vendors, as well as our Twitch and YouTube channels, can be found on our website, stpetebynight.com. The official theme song for St. Petersburg by Night is Vampire by Faith and Failure. You can find them at faithandfailure.com. You can follow St. Pete by Night on all socials with the hashtag St. Pete by Night. If you wish to support our program, you can do so at ko-fi.com/St. Pete by Night to help keep the stories rolling.
Hunter, how about you? What's a topic that you've wanted to cover on the show so far but haven't had the chance to?
This kind of answers the earlier question too. I think my favorite book was probably the Second Inquisition book, but it also threw me for a major loop. Like, it had a lot of what I expected into it, like Society of St. Leopold and all those different groups, but nowhere near how much. Like, they're like kind of mentioned and there's some rules, but they didn't dive into them at all. I actually had like, I think it was 3 episodes written out, like knowing that book was coming out. I was like, okay, so this is kind of be like a primer for the Second Inquisition. What was that? We talk about it a lot. Like, what was the Second Inquisition? What was the history there? What happened there? And then that book hit, and we were kind of all like, oh shit, we need to like retool how we're going to talk about this book, because I, I think we felt it would be a disservice to like dive deep into that history when the Second Inquisition book is almost like a Third Inquisition. It's like a new
Right.
event. It's happening now. And so we kind of put that history aside, and Sarah ended up writing some new episodes that were modern and about that book. So I have like a couple episodes basically ready to go, and like how it kind of ties into some old groups from Old World Hunter and some of the other splats that all get named in that Second Inquisition book, like the Arcanum shows up, and Project First Light, uh, and you know, So I'd love to get back into that, because I think those are topics that like would make H5 a lot more interesting too, because they name drop kind of like the Inquisition and that stuff, but they don't really get into it in Hunter. So having that background and some of those different groups fleshed out for players, I think will help people play H5 more as well, and Werewolf as well, and everything else. So that's something I really want to get into, not just as antagonists, but like untrustworthy allies, or even shit, play an H5 game and nope, you guys are have to work with the Arcanum now. You're in the Arcanum. Good luck.
That's been actually one of my biggest criticisms about 5th edition so far, is that they're doing a lot of name dropping. They're doing a lot of mentioning of stuff without going into it. Like the assassination of Hardestat, the fall of Vienna, like all of these things. They talk about it and they mention it like, oh, it was a big important event. And I'm like, okay, tell me the details. When's the Vienna book coming out? When's the, Hardestat assassination book coming out? When are these things being expanded upon rather than hinted at or dropped? And I think that they have to consider and remember that this is a new audience of gamers that they're bringing in that don't have the lexicon of knowledge. They don't know what the Arcanum is, or what Monster X is, or anything like that. So when you name drop it in a book, yes, they could go to Google and look it up, but I've also found that with 20th anniversary versus 5th edition, there's a lot of contradictory information out there. There's some stuff that hasn't been updated in 10 years, and it can't necessarily paint you the best picture. So for them to just be like, okay, here's what you can know if you're interested in it. Here's a lexicon that is up to date, that gets you caught up on what's happening with a specific organization, or here's all the details of what happened in Vienna, and you can incorporate them or you cannot. It's up to you. We're not going to force it upon you, but it is available if you want it, versus kind of just no further information. Just, this happened, deal with it.
It's also a tough balancing act though, because there's so much they have to do. They can't reprint or rewrite every previous book, and so I kind of get
Right.
why. Like, I also don't know if players would be interested in rebuying the same books. I mean, that's a criticism D&D gets. Like, oh boy, I can't wait to buy the Ravenloft adventure where you kill Strahd for the 8th time
Right.
in his castle. So like, there's a little bit of like, do we need to rewrite this? Or are we just like letting people who like the old stuff know, like, hey, that stuff's still valid. We're gonna drop it for you, and maybe we'll come back to it later.
That's fair. That's fair. I don't think an updated reference would be a bad thing. Like, this is I love the clan books. Those were some of my favorite books that they ever released. I want updated clan books. I want an updated Brujah clan book that is like, here are the major players in the Brujah clan now after the fall of Hardestat. Here, here's here's some more details about why they went to the Anarchs. Here's some more details about where Theo Bell stands on all this. It doesn't have to reiterate what happened already, what's already out there, but just an update would be nice. Something that fully fleshes out where we currently stand, considering that a lot of the material they're referencing is still 20 years old. Like, it's still quite a bit has happened since. And we're not referencing the Dark Ages where everything moved a lot slower. We're referencing Modern Nights where in 20 years, a lot has happened. Mithras is gone, London has fallen, Vienna is gone, the pyramid's gone. That's a lot of information to throw at us in just a paragraph, not in a fully expanded upon, because that's world setting changing stuff. And I think just an update wouldn't be terrible.
Yeah, well, I've noticed there's also been an interesting thing in doing research for the show and talking with other people in the community where they've talked about there being lore missing, or like there's like gaps of things in 5th ed. And I'm just like, well, have you been reading the notes? And people are like, what? I'm like, yeah, in all of the pages there are notes and interviews and letters and all sorts of stuff written in character, like in mise en scène, from people in the world talking to each other. And I am terrified of the day I bite the bullet and do a Pepe Silvio board video essay explaining X, Y, and Z from the various notes and things. but yeah, I can understand when people are getting into the system where you wouldn't necessarily think to read all of the curly handwritten letters from like Victoria Ash.
Right.
But there's like so much in there
Oh,
in
for
the
sure.
notes. And the same thing with like the Sabat book. There's like so much lore just in those little like margin notes that it's you read it and I just have to like set the book down and just be like, what the fuck? Okay, this is happening now. Great. Cool.
Oh, absolutely. And actually, from the 20th anniversary, the Beckett Diary is so all about that. It's just
Don't
a
get me
bunch
started
of
on
notes
Beckett.
and yeah, it's,
That motherfucker.
I love Beckett.
Bad archaeologist.
Um,
I think it is a little sad, but a lot of the stuff too, I feel like, is the kind of thing that in old world would have been fleshed out in like a novel. And it
Mhm.
seems like novels have kind of largely fallen out of favor in the TTRPG community. Like you don't get as many like canon books as you used to. Like even D&D isn't releasing like new novels like they used to.
ugh.
Like occasionally they do. They have some of the big old authors who want to come back and put new stories out, and you'll get those. But in general, like we're not getting like novels constantly. So a lot of this lore, we just don't have the vehicle that used to drop a lot of like these deep stories for people.
I miss them. I want it back. Anyway, back on track. John, what is a topic that you would like to cover that you haven't had the opportunity to yet?
Oh, first of all, great job keeping that tail because I think we would have lost it. Two, I'm very simple, and I think that at this point it's just a meme. I would love to cover Zemitzi, but as we thought, we had a conversation as a podcast. We were like, all right, we're about to open up the like not core book clans, and we were like, all right, get ready for Zemitzi. And then it was like Zemitzi, no, different, and it has happened many times. And at this point, I think it's just our patrons being like, "Yes, let's not do Zemitzi yet."
It's our patrons are lovely and delightful. They love to fuck with us.
They're
That's how we ended up with Corn
gremlins.
Tub and various other odd things that we've been doing.
I'll take my cult and get them to join the Patreon and push Zemitzi just for you being here. I'll get them to all push Zemitzi because I know that there are plenty of people in my community that would love that episode specifically. So for sure, I want that episode because I think Zemitzi is a fascinating clan that doesn't get enough love. They're often just addressed as monsters, which they are, but it's more interesting than that. Especially Sasha
There's
Vikos.
layers.
Holy shit. But yeah,
They're like
The trans icon, Sasha Vikos.
yes, exactly. So I want to encourage anybody who's watching live in the chat right now to submit any questions you have along the way. But I'll get to our next question, which also comes from Bardic. What's been your favorite episode you've made so far? And you've got a big list to choose from. So I know it'll be hard to narrow it down. So if you narrow it down to 3 or 4, I won't blame you. I hate picking favorite anythings because there's so many possibilities. But what has been one of or a few of your favorite episodes so far? And I'm going to stall since I see the thinking faces on
All right,
everybody's screen.
I got
right now.
one off the dome. But
I'm
if you
just
want to go ahead,
scrolling
John.
up and down on our episode list in our Discord. I'm like, all right, let's
actually
see
going
the
through the
list of them. What are some of?
All right,
okay,
Sarah,
well I got
right
one
off
off
the
the
dome.
dome at least. So I'll buy the boys time. I am particularly proud of the bonus episode we did for the Brewhob where we actually like talk about anarchism and what it is and various ways you can actually implement that ideology from like actual real world sources and how you can actually be an anarch for VTM because I love the second anarch revolts. I think that's fucking fascinating. It's a great thing for storytelling. There's a lot of things to do in there. There's a lot of people that don't know what to go from there. They're like, yeah, we're rebels. Okay, what do I do? Like, what do I actually do? And I'm just like, okay, babies, sit down. Baby, sit down. We love and appreciate you. Here's how you do a politics.
Yeah.
And yeah, and it was also kind of my low key kind of nudge to the community because it's like, hey, a lot of us in the World of Darkness space exist as people or have friends and loved ones and neighbors that are in marginalized groups that do need support, and they do actively right now need political support in various ways. And oftentimes a good way to start building those networks and having those mutual aid networks and communities is go and talk to your neighbors, like bring them snacks, go say hi, go say hey, what's up, and you can kind of build from there.
No, and I think that do you recall what episode number that is? Because I would definitely
Oh fuck, I
recommend
should.
my
I'm a hack and a
Anarch
fraud.
players and storytellers to go look at that, because it is really a difficult thing to play if you're not informed about it all. Because I think that Anarch players go one of two ways: they either go Sabat or they go Camarilla. Like, they don't know how to thread that
Yeah.
needle appropriately. That they're either burn it all down, tear it all down, recklessly and needlessly, or they just are like, well, Baron's the new prince, right? So that's basically what we're
Yeah,
doing
so
is
yeah, they
Barons
kind
or
of either fall
princes.
into
Like,
gripes I had with the Sabat in previous editions, where I'm like, the Sabat is just the Camarilla with extra steps. I will die on that hill. Uh, or yeah, they just kind of burn out. They have a big bang, but they don't really have any long staying actual activity or action.
right.
It's episode 67, Bruja Deep Dive.
Okay. So yeah, I would say any of the Anarch players in our community, or people who are interested in becoming Anarchs, or people who are running Anarchs or interested in running Anarchs, go check out that episode, because I think it is interesting to understand the philosophies of what anarchy is, and how, the approach to anarchy is. Because I think a lot of people criticize the anarchs in the vampire community or in the VTM community, just being like, well, what are they even doing? Like, what's their end goal here? It just seems like Camarilla with less steps, or Camarilla with a smaller set like neighborhood. It doesn't feel that different, but it is very vastly different, and there is a reason behind what they're doing, even if it's not necessarily publicized in the best way, or explained actively. Okay, so Hunter, were you able to think of a favorite episode or a favorite few episodes?
Yeah, maybe this is a little selfish, but some of my favorite episodes have been the ones that I've done some of the writing on. I know Sarah's our primary research and writer, but I've stepped up to take over when she was doing school and stuff, or just when I get a crazy hair up my ass and it's like, we're talking about this, and I get
Thank
an
you for
episode
letting me
done.
sleep, Hunter.
Yeah, sometimes I'll grant you that, but no, I did one that I think was really important. We did the Malkavian series like we did with all the others, but I thought we should do an episode specifically on the Madness Network itself, because it's really core to Malkavians, but it was hard to kind of fit into that. So I ended up doing an episode just about like the Madness Network, what it was. I think I broke down like 5 different theories on what it is or how it might work, and the greater implication that that has on the clan and vampires and the world of darkness itself. Because a lot of people get into, like, there's all the rumors, and we all know the art of the old fish Malk and all the terrible stories of people playing Malkavians in a not fun or annoying fashion. And I think understanding the Madness Network and what it actually is and doing is like really core in turning that clan into, like, honestly the scariest. It's what they're my favorite clan, and
My
I think that's hell yeah. That I think that's really what pushes it over the edge for a lot of people, though. And like just that core understanding, I think alone changes everything about them, and it's not super talked about in V5. So that was something I thought that was really important, and I had a lot of fun researching it.
No,
Um
I'm gonna make a huge hot take. I think, man, Malk's got the shaft in V5. Like, I think that the Malks are so amazing, and mechanically it's fine. What they do is fine, but I love Malkavians, and I felt like there was so much more they could have done. I mean, the fact that they took away, for the most part, clan specific disciplines at all, while it helped with streamlining, it hurt. It hurt like demontation being a discipline. I loved that. I loved demontation being a discipline. Now that it's just a power that anyone with the right amalgam of disciplines can have, I feel like took away some of the shine of what made Malkavian special. And it also took away the need to deep dive into the Malkavian lore about the network and, the uniqueness of it. Like, I think an expansion upon how important the Malkavian Madness Network was in the Week of Nightmares and the part it played in the Week of Nightmares would have been more to expand upon. The fact that there's some belief out there that the Malkavian Madness Network is Malkav would be a very interesting thing to expand upon. But again, for streamlining purposes, it just feels like that was like, yeah, you can look that old stuff up, but we're just kind of just trying to get it out there. And I would love to have that expanded upon. So which episode was that when you dove into which number, so I can point all my mouth players towards that as well?
Let me see. I was just looking at it. That is episode 48.
Episode 48. So Malkavians or Malkavian lovers like myself, go check out episode 48 to get your knowledge expanded upon in regards to the Malkavian Madness Network, because it is a fantastic, fantastic part of what makes Malkavians so amazing.
I think that episode borderline turned me into a Malkavian because the amount of conspiracy theories I had to put together and try and walk through, and then at the end say, I think they're all right.
Yeah.
So, a little spoiler warning.
John, what is one of your favorite episodes?
I'm gonna break the rule and pick two. Is that okay?
Two. Do it.
Cool.
Go.
One, when we did the La Sombra series, the Abyss deep dive, I thought the Abyss is cool. I thought Oblivion or Obtenebration has always been a super cool discipline. It's also, I agree, like Obtenebration and Vicissitude not being. It broke my heart a little bit. I've come around a little bit more toward Vicissitude, but we'll talk about that at a different time. So I just think that like the layers of the Abyss and like some of the like just straight up visceral descriptions that you get are just so provocative and really, really cool. So that's probably one of them. And then my second, I would say very recently, are the Setite episodes we just did. Because again, it's an undercovered clan. Like everybody's like snakes, sexy snakes. That's it.
So much more than that.
So much more. And also, I may have been converted by the episodes, so I don't know.
And what episode numbers would those be that you did?
The Abyss deep dive I just looked up. That is 72.
72.
Okay. So for my La Sombras out there, and then for the Ministry.
We just did those. Those are so fresh. That's
86 is the first one, and then it'll be the 3.
Yeah, it's 85, 86, and 87, it looks like.
Okay, so you get 3 episodes back to back there of Ministry Deep Dive or Setite Deep Dive. That's absolutely fantastic. And I love that you do take your time with it. Like if you can't jam it all into one episode, you will do 2 or 3 or however many it takes to really paint the full picture. But it does allow people to dabble in some stuff if they'd like to, or to take deep dives. The choice is really up to them. And again, it's very conversational. You break it up in a way that it's not just lore, because, if I send people to like White Wolf Wiki, they're either going to go down a rabbit hole or they're just going to have a brain aneurysm and log off, because it's so much with very little context, or you have to bounce between articles and they're mentioning all these things, but you do make it digestible, you make it understandable, and you do make it accessible. And again, I can't compliment your show enough for that, because that is a hard thing to do. Like you are taking a mammoth of a task. There is a mountain of lore, which makes World of Darkness one of the most appealing systems to me ever, because it's not just mechanics, but there is a story behind everything. But it is also very, very overwhelming and intimidating for people, but not when they listen to your show. It is very, very much, much easier to digest. And you can, based off of the titles of the episodes, say, okay, I'm not in a headspace to take on the Setites right now, but I can go listen to this La Sombra episode, or I can listen to this Malkavian episode, and they can get what they're looking for, and it's not too blended together, even though the World of Darkness is very blended together. One of the questions that we have also from Bardic is, are there any Vampire the Masquerade or World of Darkness topics you want to stay away from on the podcast? Is there anything that you are actively avoiding covering, or that is kind of a taboo amongst you or your community, aside from Zemitzi apparently, but we're gonna fix that. Is there
The
anything?
Zmitzi are not taboo. They're just being like held away like on a string, just like no.
You gotta save the best for last. So.
Save the best. That's right. Savor
Unfortunately, it's best for second for last because we agreed at the end of our deep dive series we're doing Hakata, because that is just a
mess.
it is a gumbo of several too much, and I can't figure out a good way to break that down that keeps the format with the clan episodes we have. So I was like, just put it at the end. I don't know what else to do.
Far less is it delicious gumbo.
But is there anything you can think of that you're just like, we're not interested in it, we're not going near it, or this is too much?
It's not a lack of interest. It is just because World of Darkness is sometimes #edgy. And we've kind of had the agreement of like, hey, if you want to have a game with your friends and your homies, you have to have a space for your homies to like exist in. There's a couple of topics that I've been wanting to talk about, but I don't know if I have the full cultural knowledge to really delve into it in a way that's gonna like nail it appropriately.
Okay.
Like there's a reason why when we did our Salubri episodes, I focused more on like third eye symbolism as opposed into really breaking down Obeah, because Obeah is an actual religion from like the Caribbean. I don't have that cultural background, and I am very palm colored, and a lot of those things are closed practices, and I don't want to be disrespectful.
For sure. And I think that's a big thing across all of the World of Darkness, is you got to be careful, because there's a lot of cultures they dip into and a lot of things they come really close to, and in the past have outright been offensive about, that you have to really kind of toe carefully.
Yeah, and there's a lot of things with like African American, Afro Caribbean, Middle Eastern. Just there's tons of world cultures that have tons of really cool shit, that have really cool spooky stories that I think World of Darkness is set up to highlight and share at a table well, if it's given the time and space to do so. And some of it was just like, oh, you tried real hard, but it was the 90s and you only had the encyclopedia, buddy.
Right.
Fuck.
Right. You didn't have the cultural diversity that they clearly are pushing now in Paradox. Like, they are really making an effort to be a multinational company, to take writers from various walks of life and from various communities and cultures, and to bring them in to make sure that their stuff is up to snuff. They still have the occasional misstep, but I feel like the effort and the knowledge, or the hopes, are there to make it appropriate as best as possible.
And kind of like on the second half of that, the other thing I've been admittedly pushing off, at least for researching on my end, is Charnel Houses of Europe. It's also a really heavy one. I know it's a very well done book. I know it has a lot of touches into things. I mean me, because of going through all of the clan books when we do the clan deep dives, I hit the joke point of like, what was this clan doing during World War II? How problematic were they? Were they the bad guys? Which I know is kind of ha-haing a lot of human tragedy. But that's a book that has a lot of love from the community, and I know it's a little bit more Wraith, but it does tie into stuff. All of the splats tie into each other.
You do.
Oh god. But I'm not sure I have the full breadth of education to also handle that respectfully. So that one's on a pause for the moment.
Makes sense. No, that absolutely makes sense. And I think that it was very interesting when they announced Werewolf coming out. They said that they were going to be resetting the canon or resetting the lore. But I think that because of how tied in werewolves are to the other splats, they weren't as resetty as they said they would be. Like, they didn't completely restart, because obviously the War of Chicago is still an important part of both werewolf and vampire history. They didn't get rid of the Black Spiral Dancers or anything like that. They renamed a few tribes, which is fair and reasonable. But Yeah, I think it's a really hard thing to say, like, with any splat they release, okay, we're restarting. Because it's like, well, can you ever really restart? You've already released books hinting at certain things and, referencing certain events. You can't just undo that. Like, it's
Yeah.
gonna be a
Yeah.
hard thing to do.
My hope is, at least with our project, is hopefully going to encourage other people in the community, and hopefully also encourage fellow writers and whatnot on the, hey, if we're going to be doing these mature games with mature themes and dealing with real world stuff at a table, that needs a level of dialogue and respect and acknowledgement to
Yeah.
be actually be able to handle it well and be able to grow and hopefully be supportive of our neighbors and friends in ways
Yeah.
that are actually helpful, instead of just saying I did the good thing and moving on and not acknowledging the harm that's been done.
Well, I think it also comes down to just being selective about who you choose to play with. Like, you're not playing with any bigots. You're not playing with anybody with, you know, racist tendencies or anything like that. Like, if you trust the group you're playing with, it's a lot easier to excuse some of the missteps, excuse some of the privilege that maybe certain individuals have when addressing certain topics, knowing that it doesn't come from a bad place, it just comes from a misinformed place, or that you can have those conversations and those dialogues without it necessarily having to become heated or become unnecessarily over the top, and just being like, hey, maybe we don't talk about that thing, or maybe we do something different, or
Yeah,
or make a way
yeah.
around that, or just like,
It's a
let's all get better educated or something like that.
yeah, it's a two-way thing of just like, hey, if somebody's coming at you and just being like, hey, X, Y, and Z's a problem, it's like, just take a moment and actually hear them the fuck out.
Yeah,
Because they're trusting you enough to address this,
absolutely.
and that's a vulnerable thing to be doing. So, you know.
Absolutely. Hunter or John, are there any topics that you feel like you want to avoid in delving into this, or is there anything that you've been actively, tiptoeing around?
I don't think we've had to. There's one book in particular that I have that I almost put it in the category of there's no real reason to cover it. I like silly stuff. Like, I don't think World of Darkness is a setting that can exist, that has to exist without it. Um, but there's a book that I think is both very silly and very disrespectful, and it's kind of just a useless book. And the name of the book is also
I
a
think I know which
slur
book you're
for the
talking about.
Romani
Yep.
people. And that
Oh,
book
Mhm.
basically has
oh.
no reason to exist for anyone. It's not, and I don't mean to insult the previous authors, but it doesn't really fill in niches that we're missing. It doesn't, there's no one I feel like who's gonna miss that content and be like, well,
No.
they didn't cover this, so World of Darkness feels incomplete.
No.
It's a book that you can just like pretend doesn't exist. That's pretty much the only thing that I would say we would never touch on.
Yeah.
If
It's
we
the
can find the
ignorance
right,
of the time, but it doesn't need to continue. We don't need to carry that legacy as part of the World of Darkness.
it's a weird book too because it's at least from my reading from about a decade ago, it comes off as very well-meaning, and they borderline come off as the one true good guys of World of Darkness. Like, it's kind of like we mentioned earlier, but Ravenloft and how the Vistani people are treated in that book, and it was definitely of the era, but it just there's nothing to really get out of it now. So I would say that's the only thing that I would ever say.
That makes
We
sense.
just no reason to bother with it.
That makes sense.
Everything else I'm open to talking to on some level. I know we've also pushed off Kindred of the East just because it's not really hinted at in modern times, and we're not really the people with the knowledge to talk about it.
Right.
And so if we get there someday, that's cool, but it's not on my checklist to
Jo-
cover anytime soon.
John, how about you? Was there anything that hasn't been covered already that you had thoughts on?
No, I think that even the books mentioned, like, there are probably ways we could try and talk about it, whether it be getting guests on that help us get perspective, or that specific first book that mentioned that Hunter mentioned there. Like, there is some stuff in there, like you said, Hunter, that is really cool and like has value, but it's in a book that the cover is like throw it in the trash,
Yeah.
you know. So maybe trying to be able to dissect that in a way that, like, this is how you could use some of this stuff in a way that isn't just like garbage.
Yeah, to respectfully analyze and dissect it without preaching the problematic or the misinformed elements of it.
Mm-hmm.
My next question, and I do want to get into promoting some of the stuff you've got upcoming, but before we get to that, what would you like to see them either expand upon or to bring into the fifth edition from either older editions or stuff that they've just touched on in fifth edition that they haven't really brought into full fruition? Is there anything in specific you'd like to see an updated version of or a modernized version of, or just something that hasn't even created yet that you'd like to see them expand upon? Sarah.
I would like to see more, how like in Blood Sigils they give some bare bones or guides for, hey, if you want to create blood sorceries, here you go. I would love to see more asset or tools to help storytellers with telling stories from different time periods, because vampires shockingly live for a long fuck off time.
What?
It's almost like half their problem. And I think, especially because there's the popularity of shows like Bridgerton, like Game of Thrones, I think being able to grab the fifth ed rules and yeet that into pastimes and having some sort of, it doesn't necessarily have to be a full-on book, but even just like a little splat from the publishers would be nice, because I do appreciate they have given the in the box note in the core book of like, hey, if you want to play games in different time periods, we have these other previous editions that you can look at. But having a little bit more of a streamlined, like, hey, if you're gonna play a game set in like ancient Rome, here's a table for how we're gonna like parse out bronze armor.
Yeah.
Or hey, like, considerate play expectations for if you're gonna be fucking with time. Certain time periods are not nice depending on your melanin or gender presentation. So discussing that and like, hey, you can go Bridgerton where it's like lightly addressed but like not really, or this
Well, and
trying to
some of
get into the
us
history in ways that are like informative but not cartoonish or being an asshat
And some of
would
us
be
just
cool.
don't want to tackle the blood points system again. We're happy with the hunger mechanics. We don't want to go
Oh,
back to blood points. But
no.
I do want to give a big shout out to Mr. Gone, who was a previous guest on on this show. Uh, the community clearly wants this because he just recently released and published a Victorian Age V5 sheet on his website. So if you are interested in other editions, go check out Mr. Gone's site. He's posting all kinds of sheets that are just, reskinned 5th edition rules for various splats, but in various time periods. So you can still use the 5th edition mechanics with some time period adjustments to the sheet. But yeah, to agree with what you said, the community wants it. I don't know if they want to relearn the rules and have to incorporate things like blood points and stuff again, but they would love the setting info. And I do agree. Just even Vampire Throughout the Ages book, just a single book that covers Dark Ages, how you would adjust your rules for Dark Ages, how you would adjust your rules for Victorian, how you'd adjust your rules for Wild West or whatever. Like, if they just gave some guidelines to that in just one book, it doesn't have to be individual setting splats like it used to be, because you can still use the material from the old setting splats, but just some rule adjustments I think would be a benefit, and I agree with
Yeah,
you on
like
that.
we did an episode about like trying to cover vampire in different time periods, and I feel bad I cannot remember the name of the person, but in the Storyteller Vault, somebody basically did a PDF like that, and it was pretty good. But it's an episode of I'm a Hack and a Fraud. I don't remember what episode.
Well, when
Fuck.
you have over 90 of them, that is easy and understandable as to why it's a needle in a haystack.
73 VTM in different time periods.
Okay, yeah. So
But
anybody
yeah.
interested in running different time period games, go check out episode 73. Hunter, how about you? What is something that you'd like to see 5th edition or this new World of Darkness company expand upon or, bring to the 5th edition setting?
I think for overall 5 of all the splats. I'm really interested to see Hunter expand because I think Hunter touches on every other splat the most. Maybe Vampire more just because they're so iconic. Vampire has to show up sometimes, it feels like, but
Mhm.
I would love to see them do a book that's like specifically about Hunter and Werewolf crossover, or like a book that's like when it comes out Mage and Hunter crossover. So I think that would be cool. And like Sarah mentioned, I think it would be cool to do a new ghoul book, like specifically like ghouls and revenants and Zlotchka and like all the not vampire things that vampires and other splats can do to people. Like I know kinfolk are gone and a lot of that kind of thing, but just the in between states, like they could take it from Chronicles, they own it and put slasher in there. What happens when you enter that in between state between supernatural and a hunter? But like just a book that's kind of like the human plus the in between states. They could do one book for all of that. I think that'd be cool because I feel like ghouls aren't wonderfully explained in V5. They're kind of in a
Yeah,
bonus PDF and
it's a
then
bit
in the
better in
player
the
handbook.
player's guide, but it's still not nearly covering it. Like I loved the Ghouls Fatal Addiction book. I thought that was a
Hmm.
fantastic book. So I think a modern or a updated version of that would be very cool. And I wonder if that might be something that comes a long time on the tail of Changeling, since Changeling kind of delves into that a little bit as well.
That's
Uh,
true.
if
You
that
could throw the
could come
autumn
around that
people in
time
there.
period, yeah. John, how about you? Is there anything you'd like to see them expand upon or bring into fifth edition?
I'll first say that I'm shocked that Hunter didn't answer with Mummy. Um,
I don't know if I want Mummy. I do. I love
Manifest it.
reading Mummy. It's very fun, but I don't know if we need it. They can do that last. That can be like, all right, here's Mummy. We can call this a wraps. Here's V6.
God,
We're start.
fuck you for that pun. Fuck
It's
you.
like demon.
God damn it.
But in all seriousness, I think that you already kind of said it. I would love to see updated clan books, because again, going back to just growing up near the books, those were always my favorites. They're small, you can grab them and get away pretty quick, and they just have so much. They're dense in art and in lore, and they expand disciplines. Um, yeah, I think it'd be really cool to be able to add those to a shelf. Bruja, Bruja, Bruva, all
Yeah.
clan book.
Yep.
Yeah, I to kind of yes and on Skipper's thing. If they're gonna delve into doing like a new run of clan books, I really want to see more expression of the clans in different cultural contexts. Because a lot of vampire in general is very Eurocentric, which is fine, whatever. But we have a whole planet of people with like cool stories and like folklore and things that we could bring to the table and highlight. And I would fucking love to watch Paradox and Renegade just like grab that reign and just be like, yeah, we hired a bunch of people from all over the place. They're chunking in their versions of, this is how people in various places would do a gangrel or La Sombra or whatever.
What do you think the next big release, and I mean like a splat, not just an accessory book, what do you think the next big splat is going to be, and why is it Mage? Uh, but if not Mage, what would you like it to be? Sarah, we'll start with you.
If it's not Mage, I think Wraith would make the most sense. Because you got all the Hakata and their spooky bullshit.
Yeah.
And then we have the werewolf book with all the Umbra stuff. So it's like, yeah, Wraith makes sense.
I think it would be a cool dip, kind of like what they did with Hunter. Like they released Vampire, big popular game. Hunter, they brought in between Werewolf. I think Wraith would be another good kind of like, let's go into one of the lesser known splats before we do Mage. Just because I think it'll give them some more time to perfect the Mage mechanics. Because if they rush Mage, I think it's going to be a catastrophe. Whereas if they can dabble with that a little bit in Wraith and then release Mage, which ties it all together, I think that would be perfect. But yeah, I really hope Wraith's next. I know it's going to be Mage. I have no doubt. But Wraith would totally make sense in that path we were talking about earlier that they've laid out. But Hunter, take it away.
Yeah, I agree. I think they've really set up Mage a lot. They've also set up Changeling, and I'm very excited to see what they do with Changeling. The different editions of Changeling, I think, have been the most different between like original, revised, and Chronicles. They like so different between the different versions. Like Mage, there's even a book to convert the Awakening to I'm drawing a blank on the other version. The Ascension, there's a book to translate that all into one setting. So like I want to see what they do with Changeling because there's so much they could do, and what they've hinted at it is leaning even more into like the fairy like old trying to think of a good word, like the old folklore stuff in it, what they've laid out. So I think it feels like it might be different than even what we've seen from those two, which could be really cool. I'm most worried about Wraith because I love Wraith, but I think it's the hardest of the World of Darkness games to actually play. I would say Wraith is harder to play than Mage, just because the whole mechanic of playing each other's shadows. You're
Right.
essentially playing you're expected to play a character and a villain who's trying to subvert your character and the other people at the party at the same time, and everyone is doing that at the same time. It's such a hard setup for people. Like you need to be your own worst enemy essentially in Wraith. The most successful I've done it was at a con where a guy had everyone they had some extra people show up and he had them play everyone's shadows. So everyone was playing like 2 or 3 shadows for other players. And I think that works far better. Even just having 1 or 2 people at your game who are like, all right, you're going to be everyone's shadow.
Right.
Like I think that works better. But I'm interested to see how they handle that because with the way they've pared down the other systems, I'm op I'm curious. Optimistic, but I'm curious how they're gonna knock that out. But I think it's gonna be Mage, Changeling, Wraith, anything else after that.
Right.
That's my personal the way I think things have been laid out, but I could be wrong.
Do you think they're going to take Changeling more in the direction of the Lost or in more in the direction of the Dreaming? Because we've seen in 5th edition that they have incorporated a lot of Chronicles of Darkness stuff in terms of mechanics, but also some of the setting kind of influence can be felt in it, if not directly seen. What direction do you think they're going to take Changeling? Do you think they're going to go more of the dreaming, or are they going to try and incorporate more of the lost elements? Because those were two pretty drastically different takes on Changeling. What do you think they'll do?
If from my reading of the book, it almost feels like a third thing that's kind of in between. But what they've hinted at is that from reading the books is almost that the changelings that and they are the antagonists and player changelings don't always make the best villains. So that's something to read into too. But it does feel like what they're hinting at is actual malicious fey creatures. That's what they've set up so far in all the books. There's
Right.
no friendly jokesters. There's not people just trying to survive and playing little jokes and trying to fight their depression. It is like actual evil fae beings. So I'm very curious if I can see it being somewhere in between where
Okay.
you are kind of like this half fae, half person. And it'd be interesting. I know I just talked about Wraith. If it was almost more like Wraith, where you are actually battling this fame like alien mind inside of you while trying to maintain as a person. And when that comes out, you do become kind of like a slasher or a villain or this evil creature because that would be an interesting, unique place to take it. And you could drop a lot of the baggage that both versions have, where changelings are basically just like mental illness, the supernatural versions of which which why a lot of people don't like to play changeling or a lot of
Right.
people bounce off it really hard. So I think that could be a fun thing they could do with it. I have no idea if that's what they'll do, but I would love to see something like that.
Who's
So
to say, right? Uh,
yeah.
John, how about you?
I think anyone that I've had this discussion with might be shocked, but I'm actually kind of hoping that they bring Mage out next. I think it's the obvious choice. I think that it's also the thing that I'm most scared of. I've had a lot of discussions with people in our Discord that I think that I love the idea of Mage and the concept as a game, but once you start talking about it as a crossover splat, I don't like it at all anymore. Because Mage is so, so very open and so very like, well, I'm just going to do this insane thing. And if not handled properly, it just the balance is tipped so quickly and so heavily. And I feel like they've done a good job balancing werewolf, so I have hope that they will balance mage to where you can have a mage come hang out with some vampires and a werewolf, and it won't be just like, geek that mage now. I don't care that he's not doing anything wrong. He's got to die.
Yeah. So it's
You
not
know?
reality bending, game breaking, scenario
Exactly.
destroying. Yeah, I absolutely agree. That's one of my biggest worries about them releasing Mage next, and that's why I want them to take their time with it as much as they need. Also, I feel like when the three pillars are released, it's going to be hard to keep interest in future supplements. I mean, we saw this before in older editions that like people their go-tos are vampire, mage, or werewolf. Yes, there's a hardcore cult following of Changeling. There are a few of us who actually loved Wraith. But for the most part, once those three are released, then people move on to something else or they just focus on those three. And I'd love to see as many of the splats get as much love as possible. I'd love to see Wraith get some more love. I'd love to see Hunter get more love. I'd love to see, Changeling get more love. And I feel like that's a really big thing is if they drop Mage and it's broken in any capacity, it could wreck people's interest. It could hurt people's interest pretty hard. And so just like take as much time as you need, guys. Do not rush that because it's a pillar and people want it. Like do it right. Do it well.
Imagine if they just threw us all through a loop and they just dropped a 5th edition of Scion.
Oh.
It's like, you like Percy Jackson? Bam.
Well, I've already taken up 2 hours of your time, but it flew right by, and I feel like we've barely scratched the surface on things we can talk about. But I do want to discuss some of the things you have upcoming because you are so busy right now. We had to schedule this a while out to make sure we could even make it happen. And I know with Gen Con season coming up specifically, you all have your hands full, so full. But I want to promote the Blank Bodies live podcast, which is coming to Gen Con at the end of the month. It was talked a little bit in the chat, but Friday at 12, that's when it's going to be ending. Friday at 10 a.m. of Gen Con, you are doing a live podcast, and I'm curious if there are any hints or any kind of like mini spoilers about what that show is going to be, what people can look forward to, what you're going to be discussing, what the topic's going to be, anything like that in regards to what we can expect at Gen Con.
I think we're gonna do a little mix of a little mini-sode. We also talked about having the idea of if you're a patron of ours, I will be collecting some of your World of Darkness table horror stories if you're willing to share them, that we can hopefully dissect with the audience to be like, hey, so this terrible thing happened. How can we make sure that doesn't happen again with some calibration tools that we've talked about, and then have a little Q&A. And there might be some goodies and things that we're planning.
So it's going to be a cool kind of community-based activity, but also with a little bit of an episode, but a lot more appreciation for the community. And it looks like tickets are $6 each. Thank you to those in the chat who are dropping the details about it. But I'm going to try to be there because I will also be at Gen Con running tables for Renegade that weekend. But thankfully, I'm off that morning. So I will be able to hopefully attend. But yeah, that sounds fantastic. I know you're also hosting a charity event, which details are still being put together on that. But I'd love to hear just a little bit about what inspired the charity event, what you're doing with that charity event, anything that you can release about it without going into details that are not decided yet.
Cool. Basically, in our community oeuvre, solidarity and whatnot, and considering there are things in the world that are on fire, and there's little bits that all of us can do at various stages and levels. So for anybody who buys a ticket to our live event, we're gonna do a donation match to World Central Kitchen just out of our pockets. And then for the live show that we're putting together in conjunction with the City of Glass organization, Eric is in the chat.
Going nuts.
Going bananas. The poor man. Bless his heart.
Buddy.
Everybody tell him that he's doing good work.
Doing amazing.
So working with them and working with some folks from the Crit Awards to put together a combination live show for the first half and then a charity live stream of a game in the second half. Should be on Wednesday night, but we're trying to get details locked, so keep your eyes posted. We will give those details when we can, but we're also going to be highlighting two of our favorite local Indianapolis musician band groups.
That's so amazing.
Yeah.
That sounds like a fun and incredible can't miss experience. So everybody go look for and support the Blank Bodies on everything that is happening at Gen Con, but also tune into the show and the kind of central hub of everything Blank Bodies podcast can be found on their Linktree, which is Linktree or linktr.ee/blank bodies. You can connect to everything, including some really cool freebie resources that I got to look at earlier today. They've got some amazing NPCs put together. They've got a lot of cool resources on there. Of course, you can connect to their Discord, their Patreon, all the ways to support them, their RSS feed, all of the podcasting services that you can find them on. So just go support them on all the things. We as a community need to stick together. We need to support one another. Our love of World of Darkness is what really keeps World of Darkness going. Yes, it's a company. Yes, I know we have some people in our community that have thoughts on capitalism, but really it's the community of people. It's the love that keeps this community going. We aren't a juggernaut like D&D. World of Darkness is never going to be on the level of a D&D, but as long as World of Darkness people support one another, we can make this game a thing for many, many generations to come to support and follow. Speaking of following, you can also follow the Blank Bodies on Instagram at instagram.com/blankbodiespod or blankbodypod. Go give them a follow there. There's some great content that they put out there, including some stuff about the episodes, events, everything like that. I know there's also some cool videos on there that are also shared on their TikTok, which I'm going to promote next. Yes, this is the crazy promotional tour, but I want you to follow them on all the things. So go follow them. Corn. Yeah, also corn. Go follow them on Blank Bodies Podcast on TikTok. There are some great content videos there, some memes, just some fantastic fun things. Plus, and I commented on this earlier, they're super interactive. So if you comment on their videos, they'll probably comment back, or maybe they'll follow you back or comment on your stuff. It is a very, very communal feeling, and I absolutely love that about these guys and their show, is that it just does feel like we're all friends just hanging out talking about something that we love. So go support them on all the social media and go subscribe to the podcast. Go get on the episodes. Go listen to those episodes they mentioned earlier. If you're a World of Darkness fanatic, like I know that you are, there is plenty to be seen, heard, felt, experienced with the Blank Bodies podcast. That being said, I want to say thank you so much to each and every one of you for taking the time tonight for us making this happening. If you're up for it, I'd love to do an update in a few months and have you guys back, and we can catch up on how the Gen Con stuff went and what other episodes have come out. And if there's ever anything St. Pete by Night or the St. Pete community can do for you, I know that we're all together. So if you ever need anything, please let us know, and we're happy to help in any capacity that we can. But at this point, I'd like you to promote anything, your own personal social media, anything you'd like to give out before we put a bow on this thing and call it a night. Sarah, go ahead.
Oh, damn. We're all really bad at personal social media, so it's fine. I mostly just throw everything into the Blank Body stuff. But yes, Eric reminded everybody in the chat, I am running a LARP one-shot event at Gen Con that is Vampire the Masquerade, but through What We Do in the Shadows. So if you want to do Vampire the Masquerade, but silly, I will be one of the hosts for that. And I am also part of the staff for the City of Glass multi-splat LARP Boston Besieged. So if you want to take part in that, I believe there's still tickets for that event. I'm trying to think of anything else major. I can't. Little corn friend though. We went too hard on a joke once, and the internet would not let it go, and now I just have like corn merch. Like
As they
it's
do.
ridiculous.
Absolutely.
And we are also having our first actual play, but it is actually Werewolf the Apocalypse with friend Eric from the chat. That is kind of a setup for stuff that's happening in the City of Glass Boston Besieged LARP that will be coming out over the next month, so you can check that out. Trying to think if we have anything else major right now. Oh my god.
It seems busy.
I-
It seems like you got a lot going on. Go ahead.
Right now, yeah. We might have. I'm also in the process of setting stuff up for Blank Body's shirt merch pre-orders, so that'll be also coming out soon. The Thaumatussi is happening, and donations for that will also be going to charity.
Oh, wow. So much. Hunter, is there anything you want to promote or plug?
I'm not a big social media guy, so if people want to talk to me, it's pretty much Discord. Get on our community Discord. I can't say enough how much I love our community there. I've met people I would consider like genuine in-person friends from there, and people I talk to on a daily basis are from there. Our Discord is great, and it's really not just a spot for us to promote, but like there are people running games completely absent of us. There's just all movie nights and all kinds of fun stuff. So I love that. Aside from that, it's not out yet. Maybe if we do an update episode, we can talk about it. I have a new podcast in the works with some friends I met on there. So
That's
a good
awesome.
start. And we're going to go beyond World of Darkness and talk about some other games. So that'll be fun. There'll be more details on that soon. And that's really it for me. Like I said, I'm not the most online person anymore. So yeah, come hang out with me on Discord.
Perfect.
Otherwise, you don't have to worry about me. I'm simple like that.
And John, anything you want to promote or plug?
Pretty much same as far as like personal social media. Most of the time it's just been pictures of dogs I find in the street. So it's not that exciting there, really. Discord, hit me up there if you want to talk. I'm always happy to. As far as plugging stuff, I don't have a whole lot of stuff to plug. A lot of the projects that I do are just art projects that I have just scattered around my house. Someday I'll remember to post them and people can tell me that they like them or don't.
People should tell John that he should stream himself doing art stuff because it is cool.
Absolutely.
And he needs the encouragement.
I was, and I just so much. But we'll get back on it. I'll get back on it, and I'll let you guys know.
Well, go subscribe to the Blank Bodies podcast. Show them how much we appreciate the effort they put into those long, long days and nights of lore deep dives and research and getting information and making it accessible to all of us. And if you're interested in the World of Darkness, if this is your introduction to St. Pete by Night, come join our Discord as well. We are constantly running one-shots. We have a few tables opening up with new storytellers for long-running chronicles. We stream some of our games, so you can stay tuned to this channel for, I think, 5 streams a week. We currently run of various chronicles that are going on, and you could potentially become a part of a streamed table, as we're going to be streaming some new tables coming up in the next few months. There are a lot of opportunities to learn, to grow, and it's not just Vampire. We've got Hunter, we've got Werewolf, and when Mage comes out, we're going to have Mage, we're going to have Wraith, we're going to just keep adding the splats as they come. So we've got our own community, but let's kind of do a cross-community sharing thing, push some people towards the Blank Bodies community and bring some of them Blank Bodies over here so that we can just continue to promote this game we love so much. But for my amazing guests, I'm Kent. Go follow St. Pete by Night, and go follow Blank Bodies, and thank you so much for watching tonight. Everyone have an amazing evening, and we will see you all very, very soon. Good night, everybody.
This has been a St. Petersburg by Night production. After Dark is produced in agreement with the World of Darkness and Dark Mag. The host for After Dark is Kent. or visit our website at stpetebynight.com for more information about all of our productions and how you can become part of our community. Thank you for listening. Until next time.